Arthur Ashe's talent grew in a country that didn't want him on the court. Born in segregated Virginia in the 1940s, he lived in a neighborhood where black children were banned from using public tennis facilities. His first lessons came on a cracked asphalt court at a segregated park. When he began competing, white tournament directors often refused to let him play. Some matches had to be held without spectators because local laws didn't allow mixed-race events. Even as a teenager, Arthur had to stay in separate hotels, eat in different restaurants, and travel routes chosen to avoid confrontation. The racism he faced wasn't just in the crowd. It came from officials, sponsors, and the very institutions that controlled tennis. Reporters often downplayed his achievements or described him with coded language meant to separate him from white athletes. Then came another blow. In the 1980s, after a heart surgery, he was infected with HIV from a contaminated blood transfusion. He kept it secret for years to protect his family from public discrimination. When the news became public in 1992, some tabloids treated it like scandal material, not a medical tragedy. Sponsors disappeared, and hate mail poured in. The emotional cost was massive. Every phase of his life, from childhood racism to medical discrimination, forced him to face the world's cruelty head-on. Arthur Ashe wasn't just a great tennis player. He was a symbol of change. The first black man to win Wimbledon, the US Open, and the Australian Open. But what really made him stand out was how calm and classy he was, even when the world wasn't. He used his platform to speak up for human rights. Pure grace on and off the court. Andy Murray's trauma began long before the pressure of tennis fame. When he was 9 years old, he was inside Dunblane Primary School during one of the deadliest shootings in UK history. 16 of his classmates and a teacher were killed that day. Andy and his brother hid under a desk as gunfire echoed through the halls. He rarely spoke about it for decades. When he finally did, his voice cracked. It was clear the memory never left. That kind of trauma changes a child permanently. Murray's family moved forward quietly, but that event shaped his cautious, sometimes distant personality. His physical struggles came later. Years of pushing his body led to chronic hip pain that nearly ended his career. In 2019, he underwent major surgery where a metal implant was placed into his hip. For months, he couldn't walk properly. Doctors told him retirement was the only option. The idea of not being able to play, something that had given structure to his life since childhood, broke him. Andy's the quiet warrior of the Big Four. People forget how insane his prime was. He broke Britain's 77-year Wimbledon drought. 3 Grand Slams, 2 Olympic golds, and a heart that never quits. The man played through pain, metal hips, and still came back swinging. Absolute grit. Before Novak Djokovic became a global name, he was a child playing tennis under the sound of warplanes. He grew up in Belgrade, Serbia, during the NATO bombings of 1999. For 78 nights, his family hid in a basement while bombs exploded above them. He was 12 years old. Sometimes, after the air raid sirens stopped, he'd go outside and hit balls on damaged courts. Training was chaotic. Facilities were destroyed. Fuel was rationed. His family had to save money for food before thinking about tennis. Coaches described those days as survival, not sport. Every time Novak went to practice, he had to pass soldiers, checkpoints, and broken streets. The psychological damage of growing up during war didn't fade with time. Even after the bombing stopped, the noise stayed in his head. Every sudden sound felt like danger. He developed anxiety so severe that sleep became difficult, and perfectionism turned into an obsession. Novak's the ultimate tennis machine. Flexible like a cat, mental game like a monk. 24 Grand Slams, record weeks at world number 1. The guy's rewriting history in real time. Fans boo him, he smiles and keeps winning. That's how locked in he is. Unshakable mindset. Andre Agassi's pain began before he ever picked up a racket willingly. His father, Mike Agassi, was a former Iranian Olympic boxer who turned his obsession toward making his son a champion. He built a homemade ball machine in their backyard, nicknamed the Dragon, and forced Andre to hit thousands of balls every day. There were no breaks, no choices. Andre was beaten emotionally into obedience. He later described his father as a man whose rage filled the house. He played not because he loved tennis, but because he feared his father's reaction if he didn't. When Andre said he wanted to stop, his father told him stopping wasn't an option. In his autobiography, he admitted using crystal meth during one of his lowest points just to feel something different from the pressure. Agassi was tennis rockstar energy. Denim shorts, wild hair, loud attitude, and underneath it all, one of the most naturally gifted hitters ever. He won all 4 slams and reinvented himself mid-career when everyone thought he was done. The comeback story is elite. Nick Kyrgios never fit into tennis's traditional image, and that's partly because of where he came from. Growing up in Canberra, he was bullied for being half Greek, half Malaysian. Kids mocked his accent, his skin, and his background. He found tennis early but never felt accepted. Even within Australia's tennis community, he was treated as the outsider. Too loud, too emotional, too different. The pressure grew fast. By his late teens, he was one of the most talented young players in the world, but behind that talent was chaos. He's spoken openly about depression, panic attacks, and self-harm. In 2022, he revealed he had suicidal thoughts during parts of his career and wore a compression sleeve to hide the scars on his arm. People often mocked his temper without understanding its roots. For Nick, every match became a fight with himself, against the trauma of bullying, the racial insults he endured, and the media calling him unprofessional. When he smashed rackets or argued with umpires, it wasn't just frustration. It was the only outlet he had for years of bottled-up rage. He also struggled with body image, loneliness, and addiction to alcohol during his lowest phases. Even while winning matches at Wimbledon, he described nights spent alone, drinking, and wishing for silence. Mental health wasn't something athletes were supposed to talk about, but Kyrgios broke that barrier by showing what being human in tennis actually looked like. Nick's the guy who makes tennis look like street basketball. Explosive, unpredictable, and always entertaining. He never followed the tennis etiquette rulebook, and that's exactly why people love him or can't stand him. When he's locked in, he's taken down everyone, even Djokovic and Nadal. You never know what's coming next with Nick. Monica Seles was barely 19 when the world stopped for her, literally in the middle of a match. It was April 30th, 1993. She was playing in Hamburg, Germany during a routine quarterfinal. A man from the crowd jumped over the barrier, ran to her, and stabbed her in the back with a knife. It was over in seconds. The attack wasn't random. The man was an obsessed fan of her rival, Steffi Graf. He later said he wanted to help Graf regain the #1 spot. Monica was rushed to the hospital with a wound just a few centimeters from her spine. Physically, she survived. Mentally, she didn't return for years. For months after, she couldn't sleep alone. She refused to attend crowded events, avoided flights, and often broke down in tears remembering the sound of footsteps behind her. The tennis world carried on, but Monica vanished from it. She stayed away for over 2 years, a lifetime in sports. When she returned in 1995, everything had changed. Her rhythm, her confidence, even her voice during interviews felt subdued. Fans noticed it instantly. She had been the most dominant player in the world before that day. 8 Grand Slam titles before turning 20, but fear became her shadow. The attacker served no jail time. That decision crushed her. She once said it made her feel like her life didn't matter. Monica changed women's tennis. Her two-handed strokes on both sides, her aggression, her scream, all of it was new. She was dominating until tragedy struck with that stabbing incident. But she came back, fought through fear, and still won another slam. That's bravery, period. Maria Sharapova's life before fame was nothing like her glamorous image later. Her father brought her to the United States from Russia when she was just 7 years old with barely any money. Her mother couldn't come due to visa issues, so Maria spent 2 years in Florida separated from her family. Her father spoke almost no English. They lived on cheap food, slept in cramped housing near the Nick Bollettieri Academy, and had no guaranteed spot in the training program. She practiced for hours every day, often surrounded by kids from wealthy families while she had almost nothing. That early loneliness shaped her. Coaches recall her eating alone, head down, focused but withdrawn. When she finally broke into the professional scene, that image of icy composure came from years of being emotionally guarded. Then, in 2016, she tested positive for meldonium, a substance she said she had used legally for medical reasons before it was banned. The backlash was brutal. Headlines labeled her a cheater overnight. Sponsors like Nike and Porsche froze contracts. She was suspended for 15 months, and when she returned, crowds booed her in tournaments she used to dominate. She spoke later about how isolating it felt to go from adored to hated in a day. The same system that celebrated her marketability now used her as an example. She said she went from being invited to every event to being told to stay away. The mental toll of that public exile was enormous. Sharapova was ice-cold confidence. From shocking Serena at Wimbledon at just 17 to completing a career Grand Slam, she had this fierce poise that made you watch. Even after injuries and controversies, she built herself into a global brand. She owned her narrative. Martina Navratilova's entire life has been a battle with control. From politics to prejudice. Born in communist Czechoslovakia, she grew up under a regime that dictated where athletes could travel and what they could say. When she began competing internationally, the government forced her to return home after every event to prevent her from defecting. By 18, she'd had enough. In 1975, while in the United States for a tournament, she requested political asylum. That single decision made her an enemy of her own country overnight. She lost her citizenship, was cut off from family, and had no financial support. For years, she lived in fear that returning to Europe could mean imprisonment. The second layer of persecution came later, for being openly gay. In the 1980s, when few public figures dared to come out, Martina faced direct hostility. Reporters mocked her relationships, sponsors pulled deals, and she was frequently booed by crowds. Sports networks reduced her to gossip, describing her personal life instead of her achievements. She received hate mail, threats, and was portrayed as aggressive and masculine simply for being herself. The combination of political exile and social prejudice made her one of the most targeted athletes in tennis history. Martina's dominance is unreal. 18 singles Grand Slams, 31 in doubles. Nobody's matched that mix of power and precision. She played aggressively in an era that wasn't ready for it, and her fitness, decades ahead of everyone. Pure athletic genius. Our next backstory is one that is here to inspire you to your core. So before we move on, why don't you take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Before Serena Williams became a household name, she was just a kid, hitting tennis balls on broken public courts in Compton. Gunshots were a common background sound. Her father, Richard Williams, trained her and Venus while gangs watched nearby. Once, he was held at gunpoint for telling a group to stop cursing near his daughters. Compton, in the 1990s, was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. The Williams family didn't have security or money, just faith and repetition. People laughed when Richard said his daughters would become champions. What they didn't see was the danger he faced daily trying to keep them alive long enough to practice. As Serena grew older, a different kind of fight began. Not with guns, but with the world's perception of her. She was criticized for her body, her strength, and her attitude. Commentators made racist remarks about her physique. Newspapers questioned if her dominance was too much. Even as a champion, she was treated like an outsider in a sport that celebrated politeness over power. During matches, she faced crowds that booed her and umpires who penalized her harshly. Off the court, she was dissected by tabloids for emotions male players showed freely. Serena didn't just dominate tennis, she changed it. 23 Grand Slams, endless comebacks, playing through pregnancy, injuries, criticism, and still the GOAT. Power, grace, and raw emotion every time she stepped on court. The word unmatched was invented for her. Simona Halep was born in Constanța, a small city on Romania's coast, in a family that could barely afford her tennis dreams. Her father, a dairy factory worker, and her mother sold valuables just to buy rackets and fun travel. There were no fancy academies or sponsors. Simona practiced on cracked courts, often using borrowed balls. From a young age, she felt the weight of money problems more than pressure to win. When she turned professional, most of her early career prize money went back into training costs. Her parents sacrificed everything, and when she finally reached the top, winning 2 Grand Slams and becoming world #1, it was supposed to be her moment of peace. Then came 2023. The news broke that she was banned for doping. A banned substance, roxadustat, was found in her samples. She denied it immediately, claiming it came from a contaminated supplement. The tennis world divided overnight. For someone who had spent years building an image of hard work and discipline, the accusation shattered everything. The media didn't wait for her defense. She was painted as a liar, stripped of titles, and humiliated publicly. Major networks replayed the headlines more than her actual matches. For nearly 2 years, she fought to clear her name. In 2024, her suspension was reduced after the Court of Arbitration for Sport agreed the contamination was unintentional. But the damage was already done. Sponsors left, rankings crashed, and her reputation, the one she built from poverty, was wrecked. Even now, her comeback remains uncertain. She speaks about betrayal more than competition, about how easily years of dedication can be erased by one accusation. Simona was all heart. She wasn't the tallest or most powerful, but she outworked everyone. Her movement, defense, and calm under pressure brought her 2 Grand Slams and the world #1 spot, the kind of player you root for because she earned every win. Li Na's life inside China's state-run sports system was more like control than training. From childhood, she was taken from her family and placed in a government tennis program that decided everything: what she ate, where she lived, even who she could speak to. Every match, every injury, every hour was planned by the officials. In China's old sports structure, athletes were property of the state. Li Na had to hand over most of her prize money money and follow orders from coaches she didn't choose. Her personality clashed with this system. She spoke her mind, questioned authority, and was punished for it. Coaches verbally abused her for underperforming. When she lost, she was called ungrateful. When she won, the credit went to the government. She was forced to train through injuries and compete while emotionally broken. The mental cost was so heavy that she quit tennis at 20, saying she couldn't breathe. But that wasn't the end. The government realized her potential and pressured her to return. Eventually, she negotiated her own independence, something unheard of in Chinese sports at that time. Even after she started playing freely, she faced public attacks from officials who called her selfish for leaving the system. Years later, when she became a global name, the Chinese media tried to claim her success as national pride, even though the same system nearly destroyed her. Lena opened the floodgates for Asian tennis. Her fearless shot-making and sense of humor made her an instant fan favorite. Two-time Grand Slam champ and the first Asian to win one. She inspired millions. Literally changed the game's reach. Jelena Dokic's story is one of the darkest in tennis. She wasn't just verbally abused, she was beaten. Her father, Damir Dokic, was known for public outbursts, but what happened behind closed doors was far worse. In interviews in her book, Jelena described years of physical violence. He slapped her for losing, kicked her for mistakes, and once dragged her out of bed by her hair. She was a teenager, terrified of the man who was supposed to protect her. When she became one of the youngest players to reach Wimbledon's quarterfinals, the world saw a rising star. What they didn't see was the bruises hidden by long sleeves and makeup. Her father controlled every part of her life. Phone calls, money, friends, even food. He would smash her rackets after losses and insult her in front of others, calling her worthless. Eventually, she cut ties completely, but the emotional damage lasted for decades. Jelena has spoken about depression, suicidal thoughts, and years of fear that her father might appear again. When she finally went public about the abuse, many in tennis were shocked. Others quietly admitted they had seen signs but never intervened. Jelena's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. She had all the talent in the world but went through hell behind the scenes. Family abuse, mental health struggles, career setbacks. But she came back, spoke her truth, and turned pain into power. That's strength you can't measure. And that's it. Some of the wildest, most unbelievable backstories in tennis. Goes to show every player's got more behind the serve than you think. If you enjoyed this ride, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. More stories are coming soon.